Art Vines, a man whose name had become synonymous with security and an unyielding will, stared intently at the chessboard resting on his massive mahogany desk. The very set carefully preserved a gift from his father on his 12th birthday, now served not merely as a game, but as a mirror of his own life. Every calculated move, every sacrifice, every inevitable retreat was a part of this grand match. He was 50, yet the number seemed to him merely a marker on a path traversed with relentless determination. He moved the white knight, knocking over a black pawn, and in this simple motion he felt a fleeting, almost painful satisfaction. Still burning the midnight oil, boss? Marcus's voice, his head of security, echoed from the doorway. Marcus, a former Marine with a face carved from stone, was one of the few Art completely trusted. Art nodded, not looking up from the board. Quarterly reports, next week's board meeting. You know how it is. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his gaze sweeping over the pieces as if trying to decipher the hidden meaning of this silent battle. Your wife called. Wanted to remind you about dinner tonight. My birthday, Art corrected, finally raising his eyes. His gaze was as cold as Arctic waters, but Marcus, having known his boss for years, caught a faint, almost imperceptible crack in that icy facade. Big date. 50. What Art didn't say was far more significant. Eleonora, his wife, hadn't actually called. She never did that. 3 days ago, she had sent him a brief text message about the family Silipanea, brevity that had become the norm in their marriage over the past 5 years. Their 25-year union had been slowly, almost imperceptibly corroded by the acid of indifference until the damage became irreparable. He ran a hand through his hair, now predominantly gray, once completely black before Vance Holdings consumed his life. Art Vines had built his security firm from the ground up, transforming it into one of the most sought-after private security companies on the East Coast. His clients included IT magnates, foreign diplomats, and celebrities, people who required discreet protection, complete confidentiality, and absolute reliability. Having grown up in the slums, he knew the price of security, the price paid by a self-made man. His empire was his fortress, his legacy. Go home, Marcus, Art said, his voice low and even. I'll be leaving soon myself. As Marcus exited, Art's phone vibrated. A text message arrived from an unknown number. They're planning something. Not what you think. Be careful tonight. Art stared at the message, his brows furrowed. Then he deleted it, deciding it was sent by mistake. He put away the chess pieces, and each figure found its place in the velvet-lined case, as if preparing for a long but inevitable battle. The drive home to his Westchester estate seemed longer than usual. The 12-acre plot, once his pride, a symbol of success for a man who grew up in poverty, now seemed as empty as everything else in his life. As he pulled into the circular driveway, he noticed several unfamiliar cars. Eleonora must have invited friends for his birthday, he thought, though it was unusual, given how she had distanced herself from his colleagues in recent years. Inside, the house was suspiciously quiet until he reached the dining room where his family awaited him. Eleonora, their daughter Sophia, and son Leo. Here he is, Eleonora said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 48, she was still a striking woman. Blonde hair, impeccably styled, a figure maintained by strict discipline, reflecting her ruthless pursuit of perfection, even if that perfection was merely an external shell. Birthday boy, Sophia, 23 and freshly graduated from law school, approached and kissed his cheek. Happy birthday, Dad. In her eyes there was something calculating, something he recognized in the corporate sharks he had encountered throughout his career, cold glint of intellect, devoid of empathy. Leo, 20, kept his distance, hands in his pockets. The boy had always been quieter, more reserved, especially after Art refused to fund his experimental film career and insisted he study business. Their relationship was stretched taut, like a string ready to snap. Let's eat, Art said, taking his place at the head of the table. Dinner proceeded with strained small talk about Leo's college courses and Sophia's new position at TN&W, a prestigious law firm. Eleonora mentioned her charitable activities, though Art knew she spent more time at the country club than with any actual charities. It was all part of their carefully constructed facade. After the housekeeper, Mrs. Davis, brought a small cake, Eleonora excused herself and returned with an envelope. This year we have something special for you, she said, placing it before him. Art opened it, perhaps expecting tickets to a sporting event or a fishing trip, something routine, predictable. Instead, he found divorce papers. His heart seemed to momentarily seize, yet not a muscle on his face twitched. What's this? He asked, though he understood everything at once. The world around him narrowed to those few sheets of paper. It's time, Eleonora simply said. Her voice was devoid of emotion, as if she were reading a verdict. 25 years is enough. Before he could respond, Sophia placed another envelope beside the first. "This is from Leo and me." Inside were legal documents, property transfer papers with his signature. Only Art had never signed them. His insides constricted. "Your signature is on the transfer documents," Sophia explained in a professionally detached voice. Like a student presenting a legal brief. "The house, the country estate, it's all in our name now. This has been in preparation for months." "I never signed this," Art said quietly. His voice was dangerous in its restraint. "Yes, you did," Leo finally spoke, his voice barely audible, his gaze fixed on the table. "Remember all those business restructuring documents? You should read what you signed, Dad." A cold realization gripped Art. Business restructuring. Hundreds of pages whose preparation he had entrusted to his family. Pages he had signed without thorough review because they were family. The trust he had given without hesitation had now turned against him like a poisoned blade. "That's not all," Eleonora said, pulling out a third envelope. "Eviction notice. By law, you have 30 days, but we prefer you leave tonight. It's ours by law now. Get out." Sophia's professional mask cracked as she laughed, a cold, sharp sound that pierced the silence of the dining room. "Happy birthday, loser." Art looked at the three faces he had loved most in the world. He had sacrificed everything for them, his time, his youth, his dreams. Now they looked at him with cold triumph in their eyes, with not a trace of remorse or doubt. He slowly nodded and stood. "Understood," he replied in a voice that betrayed none of the ice solidifying in his veins. He walked to the coat closet, took out his coat, and picked up the keys from the silver tray on the hall table. Stepping outside, he made one call. "Derek," he said when the line connected, "it's happening. Activate Protocol 0. Then he walked to his car, got in, and drove away, without looking back at the house he had built with his success. What his family didn't know, what they couldn't possibly grasp, was that Art Vines had spent his entire life preparing for betrayal, and they had just triggered a mechanism they would soon desperately wish to reverse. 3 months before his half-century mark, Art Vines, a man who had forged an empire from trust, discerned the first whispering threads of betrayal. It began subtly, with a discrepancy in the ledgers unearthed by Beatrice Wells, his astute financial director. Several substantial transfers from the company's discretionary fund bore Art's digital signature, yet he held no memory of authorizing them. "System logs indicate the approvals originated from your home IP address," Beatrice had explained, her voice cautious, yet her eyes veiled with concern, as she presented the documentation. Late-night sessions, mostly on weekends. Art had simply nodded, his expression a carefully constructed mask of composure. But within, a cold serpent of suspicion had begun to coil. "I'll look into it," he had promised. That very night, a monitoring program found its covert home within his network. It was an old instinct, honed during his days in special forces, a habit of never leaving himself vulnerable. 2 weeks later, the truth unfurled. Eleonora, his wife, routinely slipped into his home office when his work detained him late. Somehow she had acquired his passwords, perhaps through a maid's oversight, perhaps from old unprotected notes. Yet, instead of immediate confrontation, Art chose the path of observation, of patience. He discovered Eleonora's clandestine communications with Victor Thorne, the formidable owner of a rival security firm, a man who, over the years, had relentlessly tried to acquire Vance Holdings. Art had always rebuffed him, his gut instinct screaming of a predator not to be trusted. Now, the fragmented pieces of the puzzle began to click into place. Eleonora, it became chillingly clear, craved a divorce, but with a golden parachute. Thorne, the ambitious rival, coveted his company and his own children. They desired his wealth, yes, but without the onerous weight of his expectations, freed from his control. Art, sensing the full scope of their avarice, pivoted his strategy. He began to deliberately sow disinformation, leaving a trail of fabricated documents where Eleonora was sure to discover them. These papers painted a deceptive picture, suggesting Vance Holdings was worth far more than its true value, complete with non-existent client contracts and wildly optimistic profit forecasts. He watched a silent specter as Eleonora greedily took the bait, photographing the counterfeit documents late into the night and forwarding them to a number Art had already traced back to Thorne. Meanwhile, Sophia, his daughter, materialized back home from law school, feigning a desire for family time before embarking on her career. Art now understood her true purpose: to orchestrate any legal machinations they had meticulously planned. "Dad, I've been thinking about the future of Vance Holdings," she purred one evening over drinks in his study, her voice laced with honey, her gaze piercing. "Have you considered establishing a family trust to protect the assets?" "I have people who handle such matters," Art replied, his tone deceptively calm. "But wouldn't you prefer to keep it in the family?" she pressed, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I could draft something for your review. Art, feigning thoughtfulness, nodded. That's not a bad idea. Why don't you draw something up? In the ensuing weeks, he affixed his signature to various documents Sophia prepared, each time pretending a cursory glance. In truth, he was secretly marking them with invisible ink, a substance that revealed itself only under a specific light, a security measure from his military days. Known to precious few, this intricate detail was his ace in the hole, his ultimate insurance against their elaborate deception. Leo, too, found himself tangled in the scheme's intricate web, albeit with a palpable reluctance. Art had observed his son furtively copying files from the home computer system. When confronted, Leo had glibly claimed it was for a school project on corporate structures. Art had played along, feigning belief, but inside a gnawing bitterness consumed him. His son, his own flesh and blood, was nothing more than a pawn in this merciless game. As his 50th birthday relentlessly approached, Art detected an escalating tempo in their activities, muffled phone calls, clandestine meetings, and a deluge of legal documents. He knew with grim certainty that they were drawing their net tighter. 2 weeks before the impending milestone, he received the unequivocal confirmation of what his intuition had long whispered. Derek Stone, his oldest confidant and the vigilant head of digital security at Vance Holdings, stood before him, his face grave, presenting intercepted emails between Eleonora and Thorne. "They're planning to force you out," Derek stated, his voice heavy with grim finality. "Thorne gets the company. Eleonora, half its worth, plus alimony. And your children, the real estate. They've forged your signature on several documents." Art merely nodded. "And the timeline?" he asked, his voice disturbingly steady. "Your birthday," Derek replied, his gaze filled with sorrow. "They think it's poetic." Indeed, Art concurred, a cold shard of irony glittering in his tone. The moment's grim jest almost drew a smile to his lips. That very night, Art brought his meticulously crafted plans to their chilling completion. He had spent decades, a lifetime almost, forging secret contingency blueprints, not merely for corporate threats, but for personal betrayals as well. He had witnessed his own father's downfall, losing everything to treachery, and had sworn an iron oath never to be so utterly vulnerable. Protocol Zero was his ultimate safeguard, a comprehensive, unyielding response to the very depths of total betrayal. Once triggered, it would unleash an unstoppable cascade of legal, financial, and personal countermeasures. As he gazed at the final preparations arrayed on his computer screen, a strange, unsettling calm settled over Art. Chess, the ancient game, had taught him a brutal truth. Sometimes one must sacrifice pieces to win the entire game. He stood ready to relinquish all he had painstakingly built, ensuring that those who had conspired against him would reap nothing from their perfidy. The final critical piece of his intricate preparation lay within a safe deposit box at the Meridian Trust Bank. It housed the damning evidence he had amassed over years, proof that would utterly dismantle anyone who dared to attempt his ruin. He had visited it just yesterday, ensuring every detail was perfectly in place. Now, as his birthday loomed on the horizon, Art merely waited for his family to make their ill-fated move. The morning of his 50th birthday dawned with an unusual quiet. Art arrived home, but the kitchen bore no signs of the special dinner Eleonora had mentioned. "Mrs. Davis?" He called for the housekeeper, receiving no reply. On the kitchen table, he found a note. "Mrs. Davis has the day off. See you at 7 for your celebratory dinner." Art glanced at his watch. 6:30 p.m. He had half an hour before all their carefully laid plans would unfurl. Half an hour before his world would be turned upside down. He ascended the stairs to their bedroom, finding Eleonora applying makeup at her vanity. "You're early," she said, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "Thought I'd change before dinner," he replied, his voice devoid of all emotion. She offered a strained smile. "The children are quite excited, aren't they?" Art asked, opening the closet to select a fresh shirt. "Leo didn't seem particularly enthused about family time when I spoke with him last week." His words carried the innocent weight of a casual remark, yet concealed a profound awareness of their every move. "Well, tonight's a special occasion," Eleonora said, rising and smoothing her dress. "New," he observed, "expensive and meticulously chosen. It's not every day their father turns 50. Art nodded and headed for the shower. Under the cascading water, he mentally reviewed his preparations. His go-bag lay in the car's trunk, filled with cash, alternate documents, essentials. His most critical digital assets had been transferred to secure servers. Protocol Zero was poised for activation with a single phone call. Precisely at 7 p.m., Art descended the stairs to find his family gathered in the dining room. The scene was meticulously staged. A small cake, wrapped gifts, champagne chilling in an ice bucket. His children's faces held an expression of poorly concealed anticipation, mingled with a certain awkwardness. "Happy birthday, darling," Eleonora said, her cold lips brushing his cheek. They ate the catered meal in a strained silence, punctuated only by their artificial attempts at conversation. Leo pretended to be engrossed in his plate. Sophia studied him with undisguised curiosity, as if he were an exhibit. When the cake was served chocolate, not the lemon, he preferred. Eleonora nodded to Sophia, who produced the first envelope. "We have something for you before dessert," she said, sliding it across the table. Art slowly opened it, already knowing what he would find. The divorce papers were exhaustive, evidently prepared by someone who knew precisely how to dismantle a wealthy marriage most advantageously for Eleonora. 25 years, Eleonora said, watching him. "I think that's enough, don't you?" Satisfaction laced her voice. Before Art could reply, Leo placed a second envelope beside his plate. "This is from us, Dad." The property transfer documents were artfully crafted, bearing his forged signature on every page. Art recognized Sophia's legal expertise in the minute details. They had conveyed everything. The Westchester house, the Florida condo, the Vermont cabin, even the small city apartment he kept for late work nights. "Your signature is on the transfer documents," Sophia explained with professional detachment. "The house and properties are now in our names." Art turned to Leo. "And you're a part of this?" Leo avoided his gaze, his face pale. "You always said I needed to learn about the real world. Well, this is it." A blend of guilt and defiance resonated in his voice. The third envelope contained an eviction notice, effective immediately. Though legally granting him 30 days, Eleonora's eyes gleamed with triumph as she placed it before him. "We prefer you leave tonight," she said. "Let's have a clean break. It's ours legally now. Get out." Sophia could no longer contain her excitement, a lifetime of resentment erupting. "Happy birthday, loser." Art looked at each of them in turn. His wife, his daughter, his son. He had given them everything, and this was their reply. The cold fury he felt was tempered by something else, a strange sense of vindication. He had been right to prepare. He nodded once. "Understood," he replied. The simplicity of his response seemed to unsettle them. They had expected anger, pleading, perhaps even threats. His calm acceptance was clearly not in their script. Art rose, pushed in his chair, and walked to the hallway. He retrieved his coat from the closet and his keys from the silver dish. "Is that all?" Eleonora called after him, disbelief in her voice. "You're just leaving." Art turned. "Isn't that what you want?" She seemed flustered. "Well, yes, but then yes," Art replied. "I'm leaving. Goodbye, Eleonora." Stepping outside, he stood in the cool evening air and took out his phone. He dialed a number he had memorized years ago. "Derek," he said when his friend answered. "It's happening. Activate Protocol 0. "Are you sure?" Derek asked. "I'm sure," Art confirmed. "Full deployment will take about a week," Derek warned. "Once it starts, there's no stopping it." "Good," Art said. "That's exactly what I want." He ended the call, got into his car, and drove away without looking back. As the estate vanished in his rearview mirror, Art felt a strange sense of liberation. They thought they had taken everything from him, but in reality, they had merely freed him from any lingering obligations to them. Soon they would discover that Art Vines never lost a chess match. He was always several moves ahead, and they had just stepped into his most intricate trap. Art found solace in the unusual quiet that enveloped him. The retreat in rural Pennsylvania had stood empty for years, maintained by a management company entirely unrelated to him. It was one of several properties he owned through shell corporations, assets his family knew nothing about. Art settled into the modest house, listening to the sounds of the forest outside. The isolation suited his purpose. He needed to focus entirely on what was about to unfold. On his secured laptop, Art reviewed the progress of Protocol 0. Derek had already initiated the first phase, the silent transfer of Vance Holdings' most valuable assets to a separate holding company Art had established years ago, named Phoenix Ascendant. These were not physical assets whose disappearance would be immediately noticed, but rather intellectual property, client relationships, and key employees personally loyal to Art. Art took a worn photograph from his go bag, the only personal item he had carried with him. It depicted a young man in military uniform, standing beside 3 others, all bearing the distinctive insignia of a specialized unit few civilians would recognize. Before Art Vines built security empires and married socialites, he was Lieutenant Michael Sterling, a member of an elite military intelligence unit specializing in psychological operations and strategic subversion. His team's task was to destabilize hostile organizations without leaving traces of external interference, causing systems to collapse from within. He had officially changed his name after leaving service, burying his past so deeply that even Eleonora never knew the full truth. She had married Art Vines, the successful security consultant who had turned his experience into a business. She never knew Michael Sterling, the man trained to dismantle organizations and lives with surgical precision. Only Derek knew the truth. They had served together, survived together, and when they returned to civilian life, they promised to cover each other's backs. When Art founded Vance Holdings, Derek was his first employee. Their bond was far deeper than a mere business partnership. Art opened a secure messaging application and typed, "Status update." Derek's reply came in seconds. Phase 1 complete. Key personnel moved. Client migration in process. Thorne is biting the bait. Art nodded to himself. Victor Thorne believed he was about to acquire a thriving security firm, unaware that the shell he was buying had been systematically gutted. By the time the deal closed, Vance Holdings would be an empty husk, with liabilities carefully hidden within its corporate structure. His phone vibrated with another message from Derek. "Your family is celebrating. Champagne delivered to the house this afternoon." Art felt the cold fury harden in his chest. Let them celebrate, he thought. They had no idea what awaited them. He turned to another screen, displaying feeds from surveillance cameras hidden throughout his former home. Cameras Eleonora and the children never knew existed. He watched as they explored the house. Eleonora was already planning renovations. Sophia was declaring his study her new home office. Leo was exploring the wine cellar, picking bottles from Art's carefully curated collection. Their every action filled with self-satisfaction only cemented his resolve. Art's attention shifted to a third screen showing financial data. His personal accounts, the ones Eleonora knew about, had already been drained. He had expected this. What she didn't know was that these accounts held less than 5% of his real fortune. The rest was protected in ways she would find impossible to access or even discover. As night fell, Art reviewed the exhaustive dossiers he had compiled on everyone involved in the betrayal. Not just his family, but also the peripheral players. Thorne, the lawyers Eleonora had hired, even the bank clerks who had helped facilitate the fraudulent transfers. Each file contained vulnerabilities, pressure points, secrets. Art had spent a decade in the security business, and information was his true currency. First, he opened Eleonora's dossier. Their marriage had been a calculated decision on both sides. She gained financial security and social standing. He gained a partner who understood the demands of his work and could manage their social obligations. For years it had been an effective partnership, if not a passionate love. But Eleonora had grown embittered with age, watching younger women at their social events, feeling time slip away. Her affair with Thorne had begun 3 years ago, not out of passion but out of opportunity. She saw in him a way out while maintaining her lifestyle. And Art knew that was what mattered most to her. Her legal career had been chosen specifically to gain power over him, knowledge she could use against him. The psychological evaluation Art had secretly commissioned when she was in college revealed narcissistic tendencies and a profound sense of self-importance. She was dangerous in her ambition, but predictable in her craving for recognition. Leo's dossier was thinner. The boy was a follower, not a leader, drawn into the scheme by his mother and sister rather than driving it. He picked up a physical chessboard, setting up the pieces. White for him, black for them. He moved a white pawn forward, starting the game. "Your move," he murmured into the empty room. 3 days after leaving his home, Art remotely observed Victor Thorne entering Vance Holdings headquarters for his first official meeting as the future owner. The company's senior management, those not loyal to Art, greeted him with due reverence. In the meeting room, detailed presentations on the company's operations, client base, and financials were prepared, all carefully selected to show Thorne exactly what he expected to see. His greed blinded him. What no one in that room knew was that while they were speaking, Derek was organizing the second phase of Protocol Zero. Vance Holdings' most valuable clients were personally contacted by trusted members of the Phoenix Ascendant team with an offer to transfer their security contracts at preferential rates, considering the relationships Art had built over decades. Most agreed without hesitation, recognizing the true value of collaborating with Art rather than with his hollowed-out shell. Meanwhile, crucial operational data was systematically altered within Vance Holdings, systems nothing obvious, just subtle changes to client requirements, security protocols, and personnel assignments. These changes would only become apparent in the coming weeks, creating a cascade of service disruptions that would be impossible to trace back to a single cause. This was a slow, but certain death for Thorne's company. Art shifted his focus to his family. Through the home surveillance system, he observed Eleanor talking on the phone with her interior designer, discussing renovations in her house, now that she finally had control. Sophia was in his former study, casually packing his personal belongings. chess sets, books, awards. Leo was mostly absent, having returned to college in a new car purchased with a credit card still linked to Art's name. Every one of their actions was imbued with audacity and contempt. Art opened his laptop and sent an encrypted message to Derek. Initiate Phase 3. The reply came immediately. Confirmed. Deadline 24 hours. Phase 3 was where the consequences would begin to manifest. Art closed his laptop and drove to the nearest town 30 minutes from his cabin. At a local diner, he sat at the counter and ordered coffee, opening a burner phone to check non-confidential messages. There were already 27 missed calls from Eleanor, Sophia, and Leo, plus numerous text messages ranging from confused to angry. None of them expected him to just disappear without a fight. Art ignored them all, instead scrolling through messages from his network of former military contacts, security specialists, and other professionals who owed him favors. Everything was in motion. As he drank his coffee, the waitress turned on a small television in the corner. Breaking news showed Victor Thorne being escorted out of his office building by federal agents. Charges of securities fraud and corporate espionage, the reporter said. Sources close to the investigation report that evidence was provided anonymously to the SEC and FBI earlier this week. Art allowed himself a slight smile. The mentioned evidence documentation of Thorne's numerous illegal activities over the years had been compiled in a secure file specifically for this purpose. The timing of their delivery to the authorities was no coincidence. Back at the cabin, Art checked the financial markets. Thorne's company stock was plummeting, its value decreasing by the minute as news of the CEO's arrest spread. By market close, the company had lost 60% of its value. Art's phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number, one of his contacts at TNW, the law firm where Sophia worked. The message read, "Package delivered as requested. Effect immediate." Within an hour, his surveillance system recorded Sophia receiving a call that made her face go white. Art didn't need sound to understand what had happened. Her firm's senior partners had just learned of her involvement in document forgery and fraud. Anonymous evidence had appeared on their desks that morning. Her career, barely begun, was effectively over. No law firm would touch her after this, especially with the prospect of That evening, as Art prepared a simple dinner in the cabin, his secure phone rang. "Is this really necessary, Art?" Derek asked without preamble. "The kids too, ... They made their choice," Art replied in a calm voice. "Actions have consequences. Sophia just lost her job," Derek continued. "Leo has been expelled. The university received evidence that he cheated to get his degree." "He did, didn't he?" Derek acknowledged. "But still, they tried to take everything from me." Art interrupted him. "Not just material things. My dignity, my legacy. They laughed, doing it." Derek was silent for a moment. "Eleanor is desperate. She's trying to access accounts, finding them empty. Thorne's lawyer isn't answering her calls now that he's been indicted. There are 3 more mortgages on the house that she didn't know about. Those mortgages don't exist," Art said. "But the documents look convincing enough that it will take months to untangle them. She's calling everyone, trying to find you." "Let her search," Art replied. "Phase 4 begins tomorrow." Ending the call, Art returned to his chessboard. He moved another piece, this time a knight, positioning it for a fork that would threaten 2 black pieces at once on his next move. Tomorrow, Eleanor would discover that her social standing, the thing she valued above all else, was about to collapse. The meticulously crafted image she had built for 25 years would prove to be a sham. Art picked up the black queen, examined it before placing it back on the board. In chess, the queen is the most powerful piece, but even queens can be trapped with careful strategy. On the 5th day of his voluntary exile, Art drove to a small private airfield where an unassuming plane awaited him. The pilot, a former military colleague, asked no questions as Art boarded with his minimal luggage. 3 hours later, they landed in Chicago, where Art checked into a penthouse in an exclusive hotel under one of his alternative names. From this temporary command center, he would oversee the final stages of Protocol Zero. Art set up his secure equipment and connected to the network. Status reports flooded in. Chaos reigned at Vance Holdings. With the departure of key personnel and a surge in client complaints, the company was losing value by the hour. The impending sale to Thorne Securities had been indefinitely suspended, and Thorne himself, released on bail, faced numerous federal charges. Sophia had been placed on administrative leave while the law firm investigated the accusation against her. Her apartment, bought with Art's money but re-registered in her name 3 months prior, was now encumbered by documents suggesting she had used it as collateral for a loan she never actually received. Leo had returned home from college in disgrace. His academic documents were under review and his new car had been repossessed due to payment defaults. And Eleanor was finally beginning to grasp the true extent of her predicament. The social friends she had cultivated for decades were suddenly unreachable, her calls left unanswered. Credit cards she relied on were blocked. Her domestic staff had resigned en masse after receiving generous job offers elsewhere, arranged by Derek. Her meticulously constructed world was crumbling around her. Art opened his laptop to review the final element of his plan. A complete digital record of Eleanor's affair with Thorne, including correspondence about planning the takeover of Vance Holdings and the scheme to strip Art of his assets. This information was scheduled to be delivered to specific individuals the next day, unless Art canceled the order. This was her ultimate social collapse. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, Michael," said a voice he hadn't heard in years. Art froze. No one had called him that name for over 2 decades. "General Maxwell," he replied after a moment, his voice strained. "Long time no see." "Indeed, a long time," the older man agreed. "I'm calling because some interesting patterns have caught my attention. Patterns that remind me of operations we conducted in another life." "I'm retired, General, of course," Maxwell said. "But old habits die hard, don't they? Especially when one feels cornered." Art said nothing. "I won't ask what happened," Maxwell continued. "But whatever it was, I suspect your response might be disproportionate. You always had a penchant for thoroughness." "Is there a purpose to this call?" Art asked. "Consider it a professional courtesy," Maxwell replied. "Whatever you're doing, it's causing ripples. Not big enough for most to notice, but I still have my sensors. Perhaps you should consider if complete annihilation is truly necessary." After the call ended, Art stood by the window overlooking the Chicago skyline, pondering Maxwell's words. Had he gone too far? Protocol Zero was originally designed as a scorched earth response, the complete destruction of everyone involved in the betrayal. His phone vibrated with a text message from Derek. 51 missed calls from your family today. Eleanor is trying to sell jewelry. Sophia has contacted legal aid. Leo tried to commit suicide. Art felt a genuine shock for a moment at the last item. Status, he texted back. Hospital stable, stomach pumped. Art closed his eyes. Leo had always been the weakest of them, following his mother and sister rather than orchestrating the betrayal. The boy had made terrible choices, but Art had never envisioned such an outcome. Suddenly, his revenge, so meticulously planned, seemed incomplete, flawed. After some reflection, Art sent another message. Alter Protocol Zero, Level 2 only for Leo. The reply came quickly, confirmed. Severity reduced for Leo. Others proceed as planned. Art stared at the message for a long time before replying, yes. Proceed as planned for Eleanor and Sophia. He returned to the chessboard he had set up in the room, studying the positions in the altered state of the game. He moved the Black Knight, representing Leo, to the edge of the board away from the main conflict. The boy would face consequences, but would be spared the worst of what was coming. The Black Queen and the remaining knight, however, remained in the center of the board, vulnerable to the approaching white pieces. Eleanor and Sophia were the architects of this betrayal. Their punishment would proceed as planned. Art picked up the White Queen, the most versatile and powerful piece on the board, and positioned it for the final assault. Tomorrow would mark a week since his birthday. Since they had laughed while destroying his life, tomorrow the final phase would begin, and their desperate calls would find their explanation when they realized whom they had challenged. As night fell over Chicago, Art sent one last message to Derek. Initiate Phase 5 tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll monitor remotely. His revenge was almost complete. By this time tomorrow, Eleanor and Sophia would truly understand whom they had challenged. Not Art Vance, the successful businessman they thought they knew, but Michael Sterling, the strategist trained to precisely and ruthlessly dismantle lives. Exactly 1 week after his 50th birthday, Art sat in his Chicago hotel room, clinically observing several screens. Each displayed a different aspect of the destruction unfolding in his absence. On one screen, news reports detailed the spectacular collapse of Thorne's Securities following the arrest of its CEO and the revelation of widespread corporate malfeasance. The company's stock was now virtually worthless. Shareholders were filing class action lawsuits and regulatory bodies were freezing remaining assets. Thorne's empire, built on lies, was crumbling. Another screen showed a live feed from surveillance cameras inside his Westchester home, where Eleanor frantically paced the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, arguing with someone. Utilities at the house had been cut off that morning due to non-payment. Another fiction created through Art's network, but one that would take days to resolve. She, accustomed to a carefree life, was now facing a harsh reality. The third screen displayed Sophia's inbox, filling with increasingly desperate messages from her former colleagues and the law firm's ethics committee. Anonymous evidence of her involvement in document forgery had triggered an official investigation by the Bar Association. Her career, her ambitions, all were burning in the flames of her own deceit. The fourth screen showed Leo's hospital room, where the young man slept under sedatives after his suicide attempt. Art had arranged an anonymous donation to cover his medical expenses and brought in a respected psychiatrist to monitor his condition. This was the only ray of mercy in his ruthless plan. Art's phone, which had been silent for days as he ignored the barrage of calls and messages from his family, now vibrated with a text message from Derek. Final package delivered, expected effect in 30 minutes. The final package was a comprehensive dossier, simultaneously delivered to law enforcement, the district attorney's office, and selected journalists. It contained irrefutable evidence of Eleanor S. and Sophia S. conspiracy to defraud Art through document forgery and fraudulent property transfer, supplemented by recovered conversations, email correspondence, and financial records. Art looked at his watch and turned to the fifth screen, showing local news. Precisely on schedule, police cars appeared at the foot of his Westchester driveway, slowly moving towards the house. His secure phone rang. "They're going to arrest them," Derek said without preamble. When Art answered, "That was the plan," Art replied. "Charges of fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft. They're facing serious time," Derek insisted, especially Sophia given her legal background. "The DA sees this as a career-making case." Art watched the police cars pull up to the house. They made their choice. "What about Leo? He's excluded from the evidence," Art said. As agreed, a moment of silence hung on the line. "It's not too late to back off," Derek finally said. "You've made your point. They're financially ruined, their reputations destroyed. Is prison truly necessary?" Art watched the surveillance footage as the officers approached his front door. "Would they have shown me mercy? Probably not," Derek conceded. "But you're not them." The words hung in the air between them. On the screen, Eleanor opened the door to the officers, her face shifting from annoyance to confusion, then to fear as they explained why they were there. "I need to think," Art said, ending the call. He watched as the officers entered his home, speaking with Eleanor, and then made a call, presumably to get instructions regarding Sophia, who had arrived at the house the day before, after being evicted from her apartment. Art opened his laptop and accessed the secure server containing the last fallback plan for Protocol Zero, a command that would halt certain processes and recall some of the evidence provided to the authorities. If executed within the next hour, it would significantly reduce the legal danger facing Eleanor and Sophia, potentially converting criminal charges into civil cases. His finger hovered over the key that would initiate this command. Was Derek right? Had he gone too far? Art remembered his birthday dinner, the cold calculation in Eleanor's eyes, the cruel triumph in Sophia's laughter, the weak subservience in Leo's averted gaze. They had spent months planning to strip him of everything, to humiliate him on what should have been a celebration. "Happy birthday, loser," Sophia had said. Art's hand moved away from the keyboard. No. They made their choice, knowing the potential consequences. Now they will face them. On the screen, he watched as officers led Eleanor out of the house in handcuffs, reading her rights. While news vans began to arrive at the foot of the driveway, alerted by anonymous messages about the arrest of the wife of prominent businessman Art Vance, his phone rang again, this time a number he recognized. He answered, "General, so it's over." Maxwell stated rather than asked. Almost, Art replied, "What then? When everyone who betrayed you is punished? What then, Michael?" This was a question Art had not allowed himself to consider. Protocol Zero had so long consumed his planning that he had focused solely on execution, not on consequences. "I don't know," he confessed. "That's the problem with scorched earth," Maxwell said quietly. "Nothing grows after it." After they hung up, Art stood by the window overlooking Chicago, pondering Maxwell's words. The old man was right. Art had destroyed his betrayers, but in doing so, he had also destroyed his old life. There would be no going back to who he was before. Perhaps it was fitting. Art Vance was created as a cover identity for Michael Sterling to build a normal life. Now that normal life proved to be as fictional as the name itself. On the screen, he watched as Sophia was led out of the house in handcuffs, her face distorted with rage and fear. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed. Art closed his laptop. It was over. The arrest of Eleanor and Sophia Vance dominated the evening news. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, document forgery, and the mysterious disappearance of business magnate Art Vance following what was now characterized as a meticulously planned conspiracy against him. Art watched the report from his hotel room, observing how the narrative was already forming. A successful businessman, betrayed by his greedy wife and daughter, now fighting for his reputation and assets. The evidence he had provided through untraceable channels was described by legal analysts as overwhelming and meticulously documented. His secure phone rang repeatedly, this time not from his family, but from business partners, friends, even reporters who had somehow obtained his personal number. He ignored them all. Only when Derek called did he answer. Eleanor and Sophia are being processed now, Derek reported. Their bail hearing is tomorrow. But given the flight risk and the seriousness of the charges, it's unlikely they'll be released. And Leo? Art asked. Still in the hospital? Psychiatric monitoring has been extended for his protection. Art nodded to himself. Any movement on the financial front? The emergency injunction you filed through your attorneys has frozen all property transfers, Derek explained. The court appointed an administrator for Vance Holdings this afternoon, pending the resolution of the criminal cases and Thorne. He's facing a minimum of 20 years. His lawyers are already offering cooperation deals, proposing to testify against Eleanor. Art silently absorbed this information. His revenge was unfolding exactly as planned, even more effectively than he had dared to hope. The systematic destruction of his betrayers was almost complete, and yet he felt an emptiness. The calls, Art suddenly said. The desperate calls mentioned in Protocol Zero. Have they started? Yes, Derek confirmed. Your personal phone has received 51 missed calls since the arrests, mostly from lawyers, but also from several unknown numbers traced to detention centers. Eleanor and Sophia are trying to contact you through the prison phone system. 51 desperate calls. Exactly as he had predicted when he left home a week ago. They came sooner than his family expected, because his revenge acted with a swiftness and comprehensive force they could not foresee. What are they saying? Art asked. Derek hesitated. Mostly what you'd expect. First denial, then anger, now bargaining. Eleanor is offering to sign a confession, taking full responsibility if you help Sophia. Sophia claims she was manipulated by her mother and Thorne, and they expect me to believe that after everything. Art sneered bitterly. I think they're desperate enough to try anything, Derek replied. The reality of their situation is sinking in. Prison time, financial ruin, social ostracization, everything they valued is gone. Art turned to the chessboard, studying the positions. His strategy had brilliantly succeeded. The Black Queen and Knight were trapped with no legal moves left. Checkmate was inevitable. And yet, the victory felt strangely unsatisfying. What would you do? Art suddenly asked. If you were in my shoes right now? Derek was silent for a long time. I would remember what we were taught in our unit, that the goal is ONT, always complete destruction. Sometimes it's securing enough leverage to ensure your future safety. They tried to completely destroy me, Art pointed out. Yes, Derek agreed. And they failed because you were ready. They weren't ready for your response. The question is whether complete destruction serves your interests now, or if keeping them in a state of controlled vulnerability might be more useful. After the call ended, Art poured himself a drink and considered Derek's viewpoint. His friend wasn't offering forgiveness. They both knew that was impossible after such betrayal. But there was a pragmatic argument for calibrating the punishment to retain some utility in the consequences. His phone vibrated with a notification, a voicemail from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, Art listened to it. Dad. Leo's voice was weak, barely audible, full of pain and regret. They told me what happened, what Mom and Sophia did, what I helped them do. A long pause filled with broken breaths. I didn't understand what we were actually doing. It's not an excuse. Just, if you're listening, I'm sorry. Art deleted the message. His face remained impassive. Leo was the least culpable, a follower manipulated by stronger personalities, but he still chose to participate in the betrayal. Another notification appeared, an email from Beatrice Wells, his CFO at Vance Holdings. The subject read, Next Steps. Art opened it and found a short message. Whatever happens with your family, the company still needs leadership. The team is scattered but intact. Ready when you are. This was a reminder that not everything in his life had been destroyed. Parts of what he had built remained viable, awaiting direction. Art returned to the chessboard, studying it intently. Then slowly, deliberately, he moved the pieces back to their starting positions. The game was over. He had won. Now it was time to decide what victory would look like. 2 days later, Art Vance entered the Federal Detention Center, where Eleanor and Sophia were being held pending their bail hearing. He had shaved his beard, got a short haircut, and put on an expensive suit that accentuated his athletic build. A striking contrast to the shocked man who had left his home a week ago. His appearance was the embodiment of power and control. The visiting room was austere, a metal table bolted to the floor, uncomfortable chairs, a guard post by the door. Eleanor entered first, her designer clothes replaced by a prison uniform. Her meticulously maintained appearance already showing signs of deterioration after just 48 hours in custody. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Art, she gasped. Her voice was a mixture of relief and despair. He nodded once, his face expressionless. Thank God, she continued, sitting across from him. You have to help us. This is all a terrible misunderstanding, isn't it? Misunderstanding. Art interrupted with a cold voice. Eleanor, I have copies of every email, every text message, every recorded conversation. I know exactly who initiated what, when, and how. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingency plans? Art asked. That I would leave myself vulnerable without the means to respond to betrayal. Before she could answer, the door opened again, and Sophia was let in. Unlike her mother, Sophia's expression showed no relief at the sight of Art, only calculation and weariness. Dad, she acknowledged stiffly, sitting next to Eleanor. Sophia, he replied with the same formality. For a moment, no one spoke. The guard moved to a corner, granting them a semblance of privacy while remaining in plain sight. Why are you here? Sophia finally asked. To gloat. No, Art replied. To make an offer. Both women leaned forward slightly. Hope flickered in Eleanor's eyes, suspicion in Sophia's. The district attorney currently has enough evidence to send both of you to prison for a minimum of 15 years. Art stated matter-of-factly. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft, document forgery. The list is quite extensive. We know what we're being accused of, Sophia snapped, her legal training taking over. Then you know how dire your situation is? Art continued. Your only hope was that I wouldn't appear, that without my testimony, the case might weaken. That hope died when I contacted the district attorney this morning. Eleanor let out a quiet, distressed sound. Sophia's jaw tightened. However, Art continued, his voice slightly softer but no less firm. I am willing to adjust the level of my cooperation with the investigation in exchange for certain concessions from your side. What concessions? Sophia asked wearily. Art took a folder of documents from his briefcase and slid it across the table. A complete divorce agreement. Eleanor receives nothing. No alimony, no property, no assets. Full legal acknowledgement of the conspiracy and document forgery, and both of you sign binding agreements never to contest any aspect of these arrangements. And if we agree, Eleanor asked in a quiet voice, then I will inform the district attorney that while I want the criminal charges pursued, I will not push for maximum sentences, Art explained. Based on his comments, this likely means 5 years instead of 15. With the possibility of early release, that's still prison, Sophia protested. Yes, Art agreed, his voice firming. Actions have consequences. Sophia, you are a lawyer, or were one. You knew exactly what you were doing when you forged those documents. And Leo, Eleanor asked, a rare note of maternal concern in her voice. Leo has his own agreement, Art replied, provided he undergoes psychiatric treatment and community service. I will ensure he can finish his education, though not in the field of business. His abilities clearly lie elsewhere. Sophia leaned forward. Why not just destroy us completely? You clearly could. Art studied his daughter, seeing in her face echoes of his own calculating nature. Because complete destruction is inefficient, he replied. This way, you serve as an example without consuming more of my resources than necessary. He stood up, signaling that the meeting was nearing its end. You have 24 hours to consider. Your lawyers have copies of the agreements. Think carefully. As he turned to leave, Eleanor spoke again. Art, wait. Her voice trembled with emotion. Was anything real? Our marriage? The life we built? Art paused at the door. Partially, he admitted, but not enough to prevent this outcome. He left without looking back, nodding to the guard as he exited. Outside the detention center, Derek was waiting by a black SUV. How did it go? He asked as Art approached. As expected, Art replied, they will sign. They have no alternative. And then it will all be over, Art said. They will pay for their betrayal with prison time and financial ruin. I will get my assets back and move on. Derek nodded, opening the car door. Where to now? To the hospital, Art replied. I need to see Leo before I leave. The visit to his son was short and awkward. Leo, still under medical observation, alternated between tearful apologies and submissive acceptance of his role in the conspiracy. Art listened without expression, then laid out the terms of their future relationship. Conditional support dependent on Leo's commitment to rehabilitation and an honest life. Will you ever forgive me? Leo asked as Art prepared to leave. Art paused. No, he simply said, but I am willing to provide you with an opportunity to build something new. Do not confuse that with forgiveness. His last stop was the Vance Holdings headquarters, where he met with the core team that remained loyal thanks to Derek's careful management. They gathered in the conference room, uncertain yet hopeful. When Art entered, silence fell. As you know, recent events have necessitated significant changes, Art began. Vance Holdings, as it existed, has effectively ceased to exist. A murmur of concern went through the room. However, Art continued, his voice becoming more confident. Phoenix Ascendant is now operational. Most of our key clients have already been transferred. Those of you in this room have demonstrated loyalty under difficult circumstances. You will all receive positions in the new company with improved compensation packages. Reflecting this loyalty, relief swept over the gathered individuals. We officially begin operations next week, Art concluded. Until then, finalize the transfer of any remaining viable assets from Vance Holdings and prepare for our new beginning. Later that evening, Art sat alone in his hotel room. Before him was a chessboard with pieces arranged in the final position of a complex game. He moved the white king forward, knocking over the last black piece, a symbolic end to the conflict. His phone vibrated with a message from Derek. Agreements signed. The district attorney confirms recommendations for sentence reduction. Art briefly closed his eyes. It was all over. His family had betrayed him, tried to strip him of everything he had built, and laughed while doing so. Now they understood the consequences of challenging a man who had prepared for betrayal his entire life. He had lost his marriage, but it had been empty for years. He had lost his home, but it never truly felt like one. He had lost the love of his children, but it was based on false pretenses from the beginning. What remained was what mattered. His core business, his loyal people, his carefully hidden wealth, and most importantly, his self-respect. He did not beg or break confronted with betrayal. He responded with calculating precision, ensuring that those who betrayed him gained nothing from their treachery. Art put away the chessboard. Each piece found its place in the velvet-lined case. The game was over. He had won, though. The victory felt more like ashes than triumph. Tomorrow, he would fly to an unknown location to begin building his new life, free from the vulnerabilities he had allowed himself in the past. Phoenix Ascendant would rise from the ashes of Vance Holdings, stronger and safer, and Art Vance, or perhaps Michael Sterling again, would continue to move forward, alone but not defeated. He had given his family everything, only for them to try to take everything from him in return. Their betrayal freed him from any obligations to them, from any feeling that might have softened his response. The final move and checkmate had been delivered. The king still stood, while all who opposed him lay vanquished on the board. "Happy birthday to me," Art muttered to the empty room. And with a decisive click, he closed the chessboard case.